Moses Sithole, the ABC murderer. Imagine living in a city where dozens of women disappear, and almost nobody realizes they're connected. For more than a year, one man exploited fear, poverty, and hoped to become one of South Africa's deadliest serial killers. And what finally brought him down wasn't a police breakthrough. It was a phone call no one expected. In the mid-1990s, South Africa was entering a new era. Apartheid had officially ended, Nelson Mandela had become president, and millions believed the country was finally turning a corner. But while the nation looked toward the future, another story was unfolding in the shadows. Women searching for work began disappearing from the streets around Johannesburg. At first, their disappearances seemed unrelated. Different neighborhoods, different police jurisdictions, different victims. But investigators would eventually discover they were hunting a single predator. His name was Moses Sithole. By the end of this video, you'll understand how he managed to evade capture for so long, the mistakes that allowed him to keep killing, and the incredible chain of events that finally ended his reign of terror. To understand how Moses Sithole operated, you first have to understand South Africa in 1994. The country was changing faster than almost anyone could keep up with. After decades of apartheid, millions of people were moving, searching for jobs, and trying to build better lives. Johannesburg became a magnet for opportunity, but with opportunity came chaos. Police departments were overwhelmed. Resources were stretched thin. Communication between different regions wasn't always effective. And in the middle of all this uncertainty, a predator found exactly what he was looking for. Moses Sithole wasn't a criminal mastermind in the Hollywood sense. He didn't have elaborate disguises. He didn't possess advanced forensic knowledge. His greatest weapon was something much simpler. He understood people. He knew what they desperately wanted. Most of his victims weren't wandering into danger because they trusted strangers. They were searching for employment, a chance to support themselves, a way to escape poverty. And Sithole knew exactly how to exploit that hope. He created what appeared to be a legitimate charity called Youth Against Human Abuse. The name sounded respectable, helpful, professional. To someone desperately looking for work, it looked like an opportunity, not a trap. He would approach women in public places, introduce himself politely, and tell them he knew of job openings. Sometimes he even carried paperwork to make his story seem believable. There was nothing about the encounter that immediately raised alarm, because on the surface, he seemed like someone trying to help. That was exactly the image he wanted. Micro takeaway. Some serial killers rely on force. Moses Sithole relied on trust, and that made him far more dangerous. But if his method was so simple, how did he continue for more than a year without being stopped? The answer lies in the pattern investigators almost missed. As more women disappeared, investigators began noticing similarities. Many of the victims had last been seen with a man promising employment. Their bodies were later discovered in open fields or isolated areas. But there was another detail. The crimes weren't happening in just one location. Instead, they stretched across three separate areas: Atteridgeville, Boksburg, and Cleveland, a suburb of Johannesburg. Those three locations would eventually give Sithole his infamous nickname, the ABC Killer. At first, police in each jurisdiction treated the cases independently. That wasn't unusual. Different districts often handled their own investigations. But that separation created a dangerous blind spot. No single detective initially had the full picture. Each case looked tragic. Together, they revealed something far more terrifying: a serial predator moving freely between jurisdictions. Investigators eventually realized the victims shared remarkably similar backgrounds. Most were young women. Many were unemployed or actively searching for work. Several had told family members they were meeting someone about a job opportunity before disappearing. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Every new discovery raised another question. Who was this man? How did he keep convincing women to follow him? And why wasn't anyone recognizing him? The answer was unsettling. Witnesses often described someone who appeared calm, friendly, soft-spoken. Nothing about him matched the stereotype many people imagined when they thought of a violent criminal. That ordinary appearance became one of his greatest advantages. He blended into everyday life. And because he looked so ordinary, people rarely remembered him until it was too late. Meanwhile, the number of victims continued to rise. Families searched desperately for answers. Communities grew increasingly fearful. Rumors spread faster than confirmed facts. Some believed multiple killers were operating. Others thought organized criminal groups were responsible. Few imagined that one man was responsible for so much devastation. Sometimes the biggest obstacle in catching a serial killer isn't finding evidence. It's realizing all the evidence belongs to the same person. But here's the chilling part. The police weren't the only people looking for answers. Soon, a journalist would unknowingly place herself closer to the killer than almost anyone else. By every outward appearance, Moses Sithole could seem remarkably ordinary. He spoke politely. He carried himself with confidence. He knew how to make people feel comfortable within minutes of meeting them. That ability wasn't accidental. It was carefully practiced. People who encountered him often described someone who appeared approachable rather than threatening. He understood that fear closes doors. Trust opens them. Instead of forcing his victims into dangerous situations, he convinced them they were making a smart decision. A job interview, an employment opportunity, a better future. Those promises carried enormous weight during a time when unemployment affected countless South Africans. Looking back, it's easy to ask why anyone would trust a stranger. But hindsight is a luxury the victims never had. They weren't ignoring obvious danger. They believed they had found an opportunity, and that distinction matters. As investigators continued piecing together the timeline, they realized the murders had occurred over an astonishingly short period. The pace suggested someone who felt increasingly confident. Each successful deception reinforced the next. Each missed opportunity for capture made him bolder. Law enforcement now understood they weren't chasing someone acting on impulse. They were hunting someone who had developed a consistent routine. Approach, build trust. Offer employment, lead the victim away, disappear. The repetition made him efficient, but it also created something investigators desperately needed: a pattern. Patterns leave traces, and traces can eventually lead to a name. The question wasn't whether Moses Sithole would make a mistake. It was when. Because history has shown that even the most careful serial offenders eventually become overconfident. And overconfidence often leads to one fatal decision. One conversation, one phone call, one moment that changes everything. The problem was, that moment hadn't happened yet. And until it did, the killings continued. By late 1995, investigators knew they were chasing a serial killer. What they didn't know was who he was. The bodies kept being discovered. Families continued searching for loved ones. And police were under enormous pressure to stop whoever was responsible. Then something completely unexpected happened. A journalist named Tamsin de Beer, who had been reporting on the murders, received a phone call. The man on the other end claimed he had information about the killings. At first, it sounded like yet another tip. But the longer they spoke, the stranger the conversation became. The caller knew details that had never been made public. He spoke calmly, confidently, almost as if he wanted someone to understand what he had done. Rather than ending the conversation, Tamsin kept him talking. She listened carefully, asked questions, and encouraged him to continue speaking. Over the following days, he called again and again. Each conversation revealed a little more. Eventually, the truth became impossible to ignore. The man speaking wasn't simply reporting on the murders. He was the murderer. For reasons that investigators still debate today, Moses Sithole had chosen to contact a journalist instead of disappearing into the shadows. Some criminologists believe he wanted recognition. Others think he enjoyed controlling the narrative. Whatever the reason, those calls gave investigators something they had never had before: a direct line to the killer. Many serial offenders believe they're smarter than everyone else. Sometimes that confidence becomes the very thing that exposes them. But even with the killer talking on the phone, police still didn't know where he was. Then Sithole made one critical mistake. During one of the conversations, Sithole agreed to meet. Authorities carefully coordinated with Tamsin de Beer, using every piece of information they could gather. It was an incredibly dangerous situation. No one knew exactly how he would react. if he realized police were closing in. Investigators monitored the operation closely. As the plan unfolded, Sithole unknowingly led authorities closer to identifying him. In one of the most chilling moments of the investigation, he directed police to the location of a victim's body. That confirmation erased any remaining doubt. The man they had been speaking to was intimately connected to the crimes. In November 1995, police finally arrested Moses Sithole. For the families of the victims, the arrest brought relief, but not closure. There were still countless questions. How many victims were there? How had he avoided capture for so long? Could more lives have been saved if the pattern had been recognized earlier? As detectives searched for answers, the scale of the case became even more shocking. Investigators connected him to dozens of murders committed in just over a year. It was one of the largest serial murder investigations South Africa had ever seen. And the evidence against him continued to grow. The investigation didn't end with the arrest. In many ways, it was only beginning. As detectives built their case, they uncovered the full extent of what Moses Sithole had done. The numbers were almost impossible to comprehend. When Moses Sithole finally stood trial, prosecutors laid out a mountain of evidence: witness testimony, forensic findings, statements, the pattern connecting victims across Atteridgeville, Boksburg, and Cleveland. Piece by piece, the prosecution reconstructed the investigation. By the end of the proceedings, Sithole was convicted of an astonishing list of crimes: 38 counts of murder, 40 counts of rape, and 6 counts of robbery. The sentence reflected the extraordinary scale of the case. He received a combined prison term of 2,410 years, with each sentence ordered to run consecutively. The figure immediately made headlines around the world. Technically, the sentence means he would only become eligible for parole centuries into the future, at an age that no human being could ever reach. It was the court's way of ensuring he would never return to society. Following his arrest, authorities also confirmed that Sithole had tested positive for both HIV and tuberculosis. While those findings attracted media attention at the time, they had no bearing on the convictions themselves. Today he remains incarcerated at Mangang Correctional Center in Bloemfontein. For many South Africans, however, the prison sentence was only one part of the story. The deeper question remained: how had one man managed to exploit so many vulnerable people before anyone realized they were hunting a serial killer? The sentence ended Moses Sithole's freedom. It couldn't undo the lives that had already been stolen. The case of Moses Sithole changed criminal investigations in South Africa. It exposed how dangerous it can be when police jurisdictions fail to share information quickly. It highlighted the importance of recognizing patterns across seemingly unrelated cases. And it demonstrated how predators often target people society overlooks. Many of Sithole's victims weren't chosen at random. They were women searching for work, women trying to build a better future. He weaponized hope. That may be the most disturbing part of this entire story. Not brute force, not elaborate planning, simply convincing people that he was offering an opportunity. Cases like this also remind us why investigative journalism matters. Without Tamsin de Beer's willingness to stay on the line, ask difficult questions, and work with investigators, the timeline of this case might have looked very different. Her actions became a crucial turning point in one of South Africa's most infamous serial murder investigations. Today, Moses Sithole is remembered not because he deserves notoriety, but because understanding cases like this helps investigators recognize warning signs, improve policing, and prevent future tragedies. The names of his victims deserve to be remembered far more than the man who took their lives. And that may be the most important lesson of all. The story of Moses Sithole is one of deception, missed opportunities, and an investigation that finally came together just in time to stop a killer. If you enjoy carefully researched true crime documentaries that focus on the facts behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next case. And if you think this story was unbelievable, wait until you hear about the next one. Because some of history's most chilling crimes are far less well known, and every one of them has a story worth understanding. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.